I checked the dashboard clock as I parked outside Hawthorne Grill. It was exactly 6:30 p.m., the time printed on the invitation for my son Ethan and his wife Vanessa's 10th wedding anniversary dinner. I smiled to myself, straightened the small gift bag resting on the passenger seat, and walked toward the entrance. The evening air carried the scent of grilled steak and fresh herbs drifting from the restaurant. I expected laughter, hugs, and perhaps a family photo before everyone settled into dinner. Instead, the moment I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The private dining room was almost silent. Empty plates covered the long table. Wine glasses stood half-finished, and crumpled napkins lay scattered everywhere. The meal had clearly ended. I stopped in the doorway, confused. Vanessa looked up first. Instead of greeting me warmly, she offered a smug smile. "Oh," she said casually, "you actually came." Several relatives glanced at me before quickly looking away. The cheerful atmosphere disappeared, replaced by an awkward silence. I tightened my grip on the gift bag. "I thought dinner started at 6:30, I said calmly. Ethan avoided my eyes while pretending to fold his napkin. "We moved it to 5, he muttered. I frowned. "Nobody told me." Vanessa shrugged as though it were meaningless. "I mentioned it might change," she replied. "Besides, we assumed you'd be late anyway." I knew that wasn't true. That morning, I had confirmed the time through text. Around noon, Vanessa herself had called to remind me about the reservation at 6:30. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It had been planned. The realization settled quietly inside me. I looked around the table. Every person there had enjoyed a full dinner without bothering to let me know the schedule had supposedly changed. Not one of them had called, not even my own son. Vanessa reached into her designer handbag and unfolded a receipt. She slid it across the table until it stopped in front of me. The total nearly made me laugh. $2,218.40. "We figured you'd take care of it," Vanessa said with a bright smile. One of her cousins chuckled. "You always do." Another relative added, "You're basically the family's bank." Several people laughed softly. No one seemed embarrassed. No one thought their behavior was wrong. For years, I had paid for birthdays, holidays, vacations, emergency repairs, furniture, and school expenses. Every time someone needed help, they came to me. I never kept score because I believed family supported one another. Standing there, I finally understood the truth. They hadn't invited me because they wanted my company. They had invited my wallet. I looked down at the receipt for several seconds. The room remained perfectly still. Vanessa folded her arms confidently, clearly expecting me to reach for my purse. Instead, I picked up the bill with both hands. Without saying a single word, I tore it in half, then into quarters. Again. Again. Tiny pieces of paper floated onto the white tablecloth like confetti. Gasps echoed around the room. Vanessa's confident smile disappeared instantly. "What are you doing?" she shouted. I placed the shredded paper back onto the table. Then I looked directly at my son. "Ethan," I said quietly, "I hope you enjoyed your anniversary." He opened his mouth but couldn't find any words. I turned around and walked toward the exit. No one followed me. No one apologized. The only sound behind me was Vanessa complaining loudly that I had embarrassed everyone. Outside, the cool evening air felt refreshing. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt awake. When I arrived home, I locked the front door behind me and sat quietly in my office. The duplex had belonged to me for nearly 20 years. I lived downstairs. Ethan and Vanessa occupied the entire upstairs apartment without paying rent. At the time, I believed I was helping them save money so they could build a secure future. Now I wasn't so sure. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and removed a thick folder labeled Family Expenses. Old habits from my career as an accountant had made me careful with paperwork. Every loan, every utility payment, every repair, every transfer, everything had been documented. I spread the records across the desk. The numbers told a painful story. Car insurance, home insurance, property taxes, medical bills, furniture, vacations, credit card payments, emergency loans that had never been repaid. Hour after hour, I added every figure into a spreadsheet. When I reached the final total, I leaned back in disbelief. Over the past 3 years alone, I had spent almost $60,000 supporting Ethan and Vanessa. I had convinced myself I was investing in my family's future. Instead, I had financed a lifestyle they couldn't afford. Just then, my phone vibrated. A message from Vanessa appeared. "You embarrassed us tonight. Call when you're ready to apologize." I stared at the screen for several long seconds. Then I smiled. Not because the message amused me, because it finally erased every remaining doubt. Without hesitation, I logged into my online banking. One by one, I canceled every automatic transfer connected to Ethan and Vanessa. Next, I deactivated the credit card I had allowed Vanessa to use for emergencies. Finally, I blocked both of their phone numbers. The silence that followed wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. For the first time in many years, I wasn't wondering how to rescue someone else. I was finally choosing to rescue myself. The following morning, I woke earlier than usual. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the table, where my financial records still lay neatly stacked. I poured myself a cup of coffee and looked at the figures once more. The numbers no longer shocked me. Instead, they reminded me why I had finally chosen to stop. For years, I had mistaken generosity for love. Every time Ethan and Vanessa faced a problem, I stepped in with money before they even had to ask twice. I believed I was making their lives easier. Looking back, I realized I had only made it easier for them to depend on me. By canceling that support, I hadn't ruined their lives. I had simply stopped carrying them. The first few days passed quietly. Neither Ethan nor Vanessa could reach me because their numbers remained blocked. My home felt unusually peaceful. I spent my afternoons tending the flowers in my backyard and reading books that had gathered dust on my shelves for years. On the third afternoon, while trimming my rose bushes, my neighbor, Linda, walked over to the fence. She looked uncomfortable. "Margaret," she said gently, "I wanted to check on you." I smiled. "I'm doing just fine." She hesitated before speaking again. "Vanessa told several people at the grocery store that you've been struggling emotionally. She said you had a breakdown at the anniversary dinner." I nearly laughed. "A breakdown?" Linda nodded awkwardly. "She said you're under a lot of stress and haven't been thinking clearly." I rested my gardening shears against the fence. I've never felt clearer. Linda studied my face for a moment before smiling. "I'm glad to hear that." After she left, I stood quietly in the garden. So that was Vanessa's strategy. If she couldn't control me financially, she would damage my reputation. Fortunately, I had reached an age where gossip no longer frightened me. That evening, I heard footsteps in the shared hallway. A loud knock followed. Through the peephole, I saw Vanessa's mother standing outside with a box of chocolates in her hands. She forced an overly friendly smile. "Margaret?" she called sweetly. "Can we talk?" I remained silent. After several minutes of knocking, she finally sighed and walked away. I had spent too many years opening my door whenever someone wanted something. Those days were over. The next morning, I sat at my computer and organized every expense I had paid on behalf of Ethan and Vanessa. Property taxes, roof repairs, heating maintenance, electricity, internet, insurance, interest-free loans. Everything was listed with dates, receipts, and exact amounts. By lunchtime, the report filled dozens of pages. I printed 2 copies. One remained in my filing cabinet. The other I placed inside a large envelope. Something told me I would need it. That evening, another knock echoed through the hallway. This time I knew it was Ethan. "Mom," he called through the door. His voice sounded tired. "We need to talk." I didn't answer. "Please." Silence. Finally, I stepped closer without unlocking the door. "What is it?" "You canceled everything." "Yes." "Our joint account isn't receiving your monthly deposit anymore." "I know." "Vanessa's credit card stopped working. I canceled it." He sighed heavily. "You can't just do this." "I already have. We counted on that money." His words caught my attention. Not appreciated, not thankful, counted on. That single sentence explained everything. "You are both adults," I replied calmly. "Your household expenses belong to you now." Before Ethan could respond, rapid footsteps came rushing down the staircase. Vanessa. She pounded on my door. "This is ridiculous!" Her voice echoed through the hallway. "We're family!" I remained perfectly calm. The duplex belongs to me. So what? So living upstairs without paying rent has been a privilege, not a right. "You owe your son." "No," I answered firmly. "I raised my son. I don't owe two healthy adults a lifetime of financial support." She laughed bitterly. "You'll regret treating us like this." "I don't think I will." A long silence followed. Then I heard them climb the stairs together. The next morning, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. "Good morning," a woman said professionally. "This is Karen Mills from Community Trust Bank. I'm calling to verify a financial authorization request submitted yesterday." My heart skipped. "What authorization?" "A document granting your son, Ethan Brooks, full access to your checking and savings accounts." Every muscle in my body became still. "I never signed such a document." There was a pause. "So the authorization isn't genuine?" "It is fraudulent." Karen's tone immediately changed. "Thank you for informing us. We'll freeze the request immediately and secure your accounts." After ending the call, I remained seated for several minutes. I had expected arguments. I had expected guilt trips. I had even expected rumors. But I never imagined my own son would try to gain access to my life savings. Whatever trust remained between us disappeared that morning. I gathered every financial document I owned and placed them neatly into a briefcase. Tomorrow, I would visit the bank in person. This was no longer about money. It was about protecting the life I had spent decades building. As I locked the briefcase, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was prepared. The next morning, I arrived at Community Trust Bank carrying a briefcase filled with financial records. Karen Mills greeted me at her office with a sympathetic smile before placing a document on the desk. The moment I saw it, my heart sank. Someone had attempted to copy my signature at the bottom of a power of attorney form. It wasn't convincing. Years of signing legal paperwork had made my handwriting second nature, and this imitation was clumsy. "I'm sorry you have to deal with this," Karen said quietly. I nodded. "My son submitted it?" "Yes. He came in yesterday afternoon." I closed my eyes for a brief moment. Ethan had not only betrayed my trust, he had committed fraud. Karen explained that the bank had frozen the request before any money could be accessed. She also recommended adding additional security measures to every account I owned. Within an hour, my banking profile had been completely updated. New passwords were created, verbal verification was added, and a private security PIN known only to me was placed on every account. Karen then asked gently, "Would you like to file criminal charges?" I thought about it carefully. "No." She looked surprised. "I don't forgive what happened," I explained, "but I'd rather solve this as a family than inside a courtroom." She respected my decision and handed me certified copies of every document for my records. When I returned home that afternoon, Ethan was waiting in the shared hallway, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "Mom." I stopped several feet away. "The bank called me," he said. "I'm sure they did." "You blocked everything." "I protected what belongs to me." He rubbed both hands across his face. "We're desperate." Before I could answer, Vanessa appeared at the top of the staircase. "What's taking so long?" she demanded before marching downstairs. The moment she reached us, her eyes narrowed. "What did you tell the bank?" "I told them the truth." Her expression changed instantly. "You could have ruined Ethan's future." I stared at her calmly. "Ethan made that choice himself." She folded her arms. "We only needed temporary access." "You attempted to steal from me." "Don't exaggerate." I reached into my briefcase and removed a sealed envelope. "Ethan." He accepted it cautiously. "What is this?" "A detailed summary of every household expense I've paid during the last 3 years." He slowly opened it. Page after page listed utility bills, maintenance costs, insurance payments, repairs, loans, and monthly transfers. His face turned pale. "I've also included a new household agreement," I continued. He looked up. "Starting next month, you'll contribute 60% of all property expenses while you continue living upstairs." Vanessa almost laughed. "You're serious?" "Completely. You can't charge us rent now." "I'm not charging rent." I looked directly at Ethan. "I'm asking you to contribute toward the utilities, maintenance, and operating costs you've been enjoying without paying." Vanessa stepped forward. "This is unbelievable." "No," I replied. "What was unbelievable was expecting me to fund your lifestyle forever." She pointed toward the staircase. "We'll never agree to this." "You don't have to." I removed another envelope. "This is a formal notice." Ethan swallowed nervously. "If you choose not to contribute, you'll have 90 days to find another place to live." The hallway fell silent. Vanessa stared at me in complete disbelief. "You'd throw your own son out?" "I would ask two capable adults to support themselves." Ethan remained motionless, still holding both envelopes. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, Vanessa grabbed Ethan's arm. "Come upstairs." He didn't move. She pulled harder. "Now." Without another word, they disappeared into their apartment. That evening, I sat on my back porch watching the sunset. For the first time in years, I questioned whether kindness and enabling had become the same thing. Perhaps they had. The following weeks revealed just how much my financial support had been covering. Vanessa's expensive SUV rarely left the driveway anymore. Delivery trucks stopped arriving with expensive furniture. Weekend shopping trips disappeared. Even the expensive restaurant takeout they enjoyed several nights a week came to an end. Reality had finally caught up with them. About 3 weeks later, there was a gentle knock at my back door. When I opened it, Ethan stood there alone. He looked thinner, older. Tired didn't begin to describe him. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. We sat quietly at the kitchen table where he had once completed homework as a teenager. After several minutes, he finally spoke. I didn't realize how much debt we were carrying. I listened without interrupting. Vanessa financed almost everything. He looked ashamed. The vacations, the furniture, the designer clothes, even the anniversary dinner. He shook his head slowly. "I honestly believed we'd catch up eventually because I thought you'd always help." His voice cracked. "I was wrong." I looked at my son for a long moment. "You weren't wrong because you needed help." He raised his eyes. "You were wrong because you stopped taking responsibility." Tears filled his eyes, but he didn't argue. For the first time in years, I saw genuine regret instead of excuses. Still, trust once broken could not be rebuilt overnight. There was only one path forward now: accountability. After Ethan left that evening, I remained at the kitchen table long after the coffee in my cup had turned cold. His confession echoed through my mind. For the first time in years, he had admitted the truth without blaming someone else. Still, regret alone could not erase broken trust. Actions would have to do that. The following morning, I received the first payment toward the household expenses. It wasn't a large amount, but it arrived exactly when promised. I smiled faintly. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the effort. Over the next several weeks, the atmosphere inside the duplex changed completely. The loud parties upstairs disappeared. There were no more expensive deliveries or luxury purchases. Instead, I often heard Ethan leaving before sunrise and returning well after dark. He had taken extra shifts at work to keep up with the bills. Vanessa, however, remained as bitter as ever. Whenever we crossed paths in the driveway, she either ignored me completely or shot me a look filled with resentment. One Saturday afternoon, she finally confronted me. "You've destroyed our lives," she said sharply. I looked up from the flower bed I had been tending. "No, Vanessa," she folded her arms. "If you hadn't stopped helping us, none of this would have happened." I stood slowly and brushed the dirt from my gardening gloves. "The problems didn't begin when I stopped paying." She frowned. "They began when you started spending money you didn't have." Her expression hardened. "You think you're teaching us a lesson?" "I am." "And what lesson is that?" "That every adult is responsible for the life they create." She scoffed and stormed back inside without another word. I watched her leave, feeling no anger, only certainty. A month later, Ethan knocked on my door again. This time he carried a folder. "I'd like you to see something." Inside were copies of credit card statements, loan balances, and repayment schedules. "I've been meeting with a financial counselor," he explained. "We're selling the SUV." I nodded approvingly. "And we've canceled every unnecessary subscription." He hesitated before continuing. "I also picked up weekend work." For the first time in a long while, I saw determination replacing desperation. "You should be proud of that," I told him. He looked down. "I wish I'd learned this years ago." "So do I." A quiet silence settled between us. Finally, Ethan asked the question I knew had been weighing on him. "Do you still want us to move out?" I answered honestly. "Yes." His shoulders dropped slightly, though he didn't seem surprised. "I've already signed a lease with a new tenant." He nodded. "I understand." "There comes a point when children need a home of their own," I continued. "Not because they're unwanted, but because independence helps people grow." He smiled sadly. "I think I'm finally beginning to understand." During the following weeks, cardboard boxes slowly filled the upstairs apartment. Furniture was sold, decorations disappeared from the windows. The expensive lifestyle Vanessa had worked so hard to display was being packed away piece by piece. One afternoon, a retired school librarian named Helen visited to see the vacant apartment. She loved the quiet neighborhood, admired the garden, and signed the lease before leaving. Knowing the upstairs would soon become home to someone who appreciated peace filled me with relief. As moving day approached, Ethan became noticeably calmer. Vanessa became noticeably angrier. The morning the moving truck arrived, several members of Vanessa's family came to help. No one greeted me. I simply sat on my front porch with a book, allowing them to carry boxes back and forth. Hours passed. By late afternoon, the apartment stood empty. Ethan walked down the stairs holding a ring of keys. He stopped in front of me. "The place has been cleaned." I accepted the keys. "Thank you." He hesitated. "I know I can't undo what happened." I looked into my son's tired eyes. "No, but I can do better from here." A small smile crossed my face. "That's all anyone can ask." He nodded quietly before walking toward the moving truck. Vanessa climbed inside without looking back. Minutes later, the truck disappeared down the street. For the first time in nearly a decade, the upstairs apartment was silent. I slowly climbed the staircase. Every room was empty. Fresh sunlight poured through the windows. The silence didn't feel lonely. It felt hopeful. Standing in the middle of the vacant living room, I realized something important. Setting boundaries hadn't cost me my family. It had simply revealed who was willing to respect them. As I locked the apartment and slipped the keys into my pocket, I knew one final chapter still remained. Life was finally moving forward, for all of us. 6 months passed more quickly than I expected. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm that I had almost forgotten was possible. Helen, my new tenant, proved to be everything I had hoped for. She paid her rent on time, kept the upstairs apartment spotless, and often invited me for tea on Sunday afternoons. We shared stories about our careers, our travels, and the books we loved. Unlike before, my home had become a place of calm instead of constant financial pressure. My savings account slowly began to recover. For years, I had watched money disappear as quickly as I earned it. Now, every month brought a little more security. Instead of worrying about someone else's bills, I finally started planning for my own future. I booked the vacation I had postponed for nearly 10 years, a 2-week trip to the coast, where I had always dreamed of spending quiet mornings watching the sunrise over the ocean. It felt wonderful to spend my money without guilt. The constant anxiety that had followed me for years was gone. Most of the extended family never contacted me again. At first, I wondered if I should feel hurt. Instead, I felt relieved. The people who had disappeared were the same people who had only appeared when they needed financial help. Once the money stopped, so did their interest. That realization no longer saddened me. It set me free. Ethan, however, was different. About once every few weeks, he called from his new phone number. Our conversations remained short but respectful. He never asked for money. He never made excuses. Instead, he told me about work, the apartment he had rented, and the progress he was making toward paying off his debts. One afternoon, he shared news I hadn't expected. "Vanessa and I have separated." I remained silent, allowing him to continue. We argued constantly after we moved. Without easy money, everything fell apart. His voice carried more sadness than anger. I finally realized our marriage had been built on appearances instead of partnership. "I'm sorry you're hurting," I replied honestly. "So am I." There was a long pause. "But maybe this is the wake-up call I needed." "I hope so." "I've learned something, Mom." "What is it?" "No one can build a stable life by depending on someone else's generosity forever." Hearing those words filled me with quiet satisfaction, not because my son had suffered, but because he had finally accepted responsibility for his own choices. As the seasons changed, my own life continued improving. The garden bloomed more beautifully than ever before. I joined a local book club, reconnected with old friends, and even started volunteering twice a week at the community library. For the first time since retiring, my days belonged entirely to me. One Saturday morning, my longtime friend Robert stopped by carrying fresh pastries from a nearby bakery. We sat together on the porch overlooking the garden. "You seem happier," he observed. "I am." "What changed?" I smiled thoughtfully before answering. "I finally stopped confusing love with sacrifice." He nodded slowly. "That's a difficult lesson." "It took me far too long to learn." A week later, the morning of my vacation finally arrived. My suitcase stood beside the front door while Helen promised to water the flowers and collect my mail until I returned. Just as I reached for my car keys, my phone rang. It was Ethan. "Hi, Mom." "Good morning. I wanted to wish you a safe trip." "Thank you. There's something else." I waited patiently. "I made my final repayment this morning." I smiled. "I saw the deposit. I'm grateful you didn't give up on me, even when you stopped supporting me." His words touched me deeply. "I never stopped loving you, Ethan." "I know. I simply stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own decisions." "I understand that now." His voice sounded stronger than it had in years. "I've learned to budget. I cook at home. I've paid off most of my debts. And for the first time since college, I actually have money in my savings account." I couldn't hide my smile. "I'm proud of you." "Thank you, Mom." After we ended the call, I stood quietly on the front porch for a moment. The house looked exactly the same as it always had, yet everything had changed. It was no longer a place where I felt obligated to rescue everyone around me. It had become a home filled with peace, respect, and healthy boundaries. As I locked the front door, I realized the greatest gift I had given myself wasn't financial security. It was self-respect. Sometimes the hardest word to say is no, but that single word can open the door to an entirely new life. I placed my suitcase in the car and drove toward the coast with a heart that felt lighter than it had in many years. Looking ahead at the open road, I smiled. The chapter defined by obligation was over. A new one, built on freedom, dignity, and peace, had finally begun.